Stay tuned now for Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome, everybody, to Westchester Eye on the Radio. I'm Peter Moses with my co-host Ardina Seward and John Sharan. I put Ardina second because I like her better than I like Sharan these days.
You.
That's only for today.
No, not really. I've actually known John a year longer than I've known you. Anyway, we have a big show today. I don't want to do too much playing around here because there's a time inference with this particular story. Ardina, I'll let you introduce Alvin Queen, who he is, his story a little bit, and then we can both introduce one of his friends who's here, who has a great name, by the way. The guy's got a perfect name for the business he's in. Anyway, Ardina, go ahead.
Okay. Alvin Queen is a legendary jazz musician.
That's Alvin Queen.
Alvin Queen. Alvin grew up in, actually was born in the Bronx, grew up in Mount Vernon, started playing drums when he was 8 years old. 8, you hear me? 8 years old. Hung out with the likes of Horace Silver and John Coltrane before he was even old enough to drive. But anyway, fast forward, this is now 2017. He was asked to do a gig in Washington D.C.
Wait, you gotta go before that he moved to Europe.
Okay, I'm getting to that.
You're going to back into that.
You're wasting time.
Going forward, Peter's going in reverse, but Alvin is living in Switzerland, and he was asked to do
and he has dual citizenship.
He has had dual citizenship.
Right.
He was asked to do a gig in Washington D.C. on I believe it's November 14th by the French American Cultural Foundation. Got all his papers organized, only to find out that he could not enter the United States because he had 2 criminal offenses. But the criminal offenses took place 50 years ago when he was a teenager. He was 16 years old. I believe one charge was a DUI. The other charge was a minor drug charge. And those charges were subsequently dropped. But his record was never expunged, so he applies for transport from Switzerland to the United States, only to be told, you can't come in.
Now this is after the election of yellow hair in Washington, right?
Number 45.
Okay. Make sure we put that in perspective. Go ahead.
And but in the interim, he was able to accept an offer to play in Canada, in Montreal, and he will be playing there on November 4th at the Upstairs Club in Montreal. And interestingly enough, what is important is that Canada and the United States share information as far as criminal records. So the Canadians are aware of Alvin's alleged criminal record, but
not alleged. He acknowledged
of his. Well, I say alleged because the charges were dropped.
So that's that's
Doesn't
not
matter.
a charge.
It's not a charge, and the Canadians have chosen to admit him. Wherein in the United States, even though it is an important cultural affair, he has been denied. Now, as far as the law is concerned, he can apply for a waiver, but the waiver takes anywhere from 6 to 9 months, which would mean that even if he had applied for the waiver, he still could not get back to the States in time to do this gig. And this has implications for a vast number of Americans. According to the Department of Justice, one third of American citizens have criminal charges that were dropped, but they still remain on the records, which could impact your ability to rent an apartment, which could impact your ability to get a job, even though it could have happened.
Or come back to the country.
If you're an American citizen, you can come back to the country. But in Alvin's case, he had given up his American citizenship in 2016 because basically he was paying taxes for both countries. He was paying taxes to the Swiss. He was paying taxes to the Americans. So he felt that what was the point of that? So
Let me just chime in that there are thousands of Americans who've done the very same thing. Because people go for dual citizenship if you actually live in the country that you have dual citizenship, apart from the United States, and you earn money there, you have to pay taxes at both places. And there are people who decide their adopted country is where they want to spend the rest of their lives, so they give up the citizenship, not out of dislike for their country of origin, but basically for financial reasons.
But you've heard it from my side of the fence. Alvin, let's hear from your side of the fence.
We're going to break.
We're going to break, and I think we're going to have some.
Well, we've set up his rejoinder when we get back.
And coming out of the break, we're going to hear some music.
So,
by Alvin.
John, you're going to weigh in too a little later.
Absolutely, Peter.
Okay, and we have his friend, who I just love his name, Gil
Chimes.
Chimes, and he's a drummer. And a vibes player, too, and a pianist. So he knows his chimes.
And harmonica.
And harmonica. We'll be back with everybody after this very long Fox News and Fox Business News break with some commercials sprinkled in as well. This is Westchester Eye on the Radio live on WVOX and WVOX.com. We will be back soon.
Match.com/now.
VOX. Now Westchester's only community station. WVOX.
Let's return now to Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
Okay, we're back on the air. At some point, we're going to be playing some music. But right now, we're back to speak with Alvin Queen, who had the longest intro of any person in the history of this show. Alvin, can you give us a little flavor for what you've been going through and how frustrating this is for you?
Well, but you know, the most important thing is I was frustrated, but I'm to a point now where it's a joke. You know, it's I don't believe that. You know, I work for the American government doing tours all over the world. If they say I was a criminal then, how did I manage to go through 6 or 7 of their passports and also work for their government? You see? And I got to a certain point. Is just that this was all supposed to have been all youthful offender, and the drug charges in the Bronx was dropped, and the other thing was the DUI, which was harassment of a police officer, and I was there at the Westchester County Penitentiary for 2.5 months, and that was supposed to have been a youthful offender charge. None of this was supposed to come up, you see? And what had happened, I'll tell you another thing, because I heard you all speaking before about turning, I turned the American passport over and I took the Swiss one. I've been married, I've been here for 40 years, 35, 40 years. So I established a whole different life.
But Alvin, you don't sound Swiss.
Pardon me?
You don't sound Swiss.
I don't sound what?
Swiss.
No, I'm fine.
No. You don't sound like you were born in Switzerland. It was a joke. Sorry.
Oh, thank you very much. Anyway, what happened was to file a double taxation is $1,500 a year I was paying, and I didn't owe the American government any money. I added that up for 30 years. It's $50,000 I spent just for the paperwork. So I said, I'll get rid of that passport because I have the Swiss passport. Then the people in Washington, D.C. wanted to honor the 369 hellfighters, which haven't been honored in 100 years. These guys never got any credit. So they called me from Washington, D.C., and I told them exactly that I did not have the American passport. They said they would file a petition of $129. They paid $1,500 for that, okay? And they sent that over here for me to go get the visa, and I went and applied for the visa, paid another $190, and the next day they said, Mr. Queen, we want to talk about your criminal record. So I said, what criminal record? Because I know that a youthful offender is not even supposed to show up. So they said, you know anything about the Valhalla, New York? I said, yes, I do know something about Valhalla. And there's a charge in the Bronx. I said, that charge was thrown out. They said, we can't give you the visa until they clean this up, okay? So what had happened was when they could not give me that visa, they said, you'll be flagged if you land in Kennedy Airport. They'll flag you down like that. So then I made arrangements, and I contact Elliot Engel's office over 2 weeks ago.
Who has never called back.
They got the authorization.
Dumbest congressman I've ever met in my life.
And I never got any response from anyone. You see, so I mean, I don't know. Is it purposely you're trying to destroy a person's career, or what? But this is ridiculous.
Well, it is ridiculous. It is ridiculous on many fronts. First of all, because it was a French-American cultural event, which definitely would have elevated the United States in the eyes of the French now, because let's face it, the relationship between France and America is, shall we call it, rather tepid at the moment. And also the point that the Canadians have taken you in, and it certainly shows the perspective of the Canadians.
Well, the whole thing about it, you know, eventually they have a new law they're getting ready to put all over Europe, okay? So you have DUWI, you got everything. The Europeans want the Americans' information. It's starting like that now, okay? So there's a whole lot of people who will not be able to fly to Europe. You see, if it's because of DUI or fighting or argument or something, if a kid is a kid, you know, and you can't. I have proved to you 50 years of my life that I'm not the kid. So why are you slamming this up against my face? What is the reason?
Alvin, have you approached the French about trying to help to get you back into the country, into the United States?
I hired a French musician from Paris to be a part of that event. He's got an OB1 visa, and he's entering to play that event.
But any French
government? The musicians for that.
Are there any French government people who are working on your behalf?
No. There's no one. And the people who started this is a friend of mine and who works as for one of the ambassadors. The ambassador, him and the organizer, one for the Americans and one for the French. He's trying to call me to tell me how much sympathy he got. Do something. I don't need your sympathy. I got that. You see? So I mean, this is where it's at. I mean, it doesn't bother me. My money don't come out of America. Never have. When I come there, I bring money. You see, I work the rest of the world. But the thing about it, this is unbelievable. When I become a Swiss, 100%, now I'm a criminal. But I was not criminal when I was working for the American government. I mean, that's unbelievable. You see?
And in the larger picture, I mean, you basically become a kind of icon for the millions of Americans who are impacted in a similar way. I don't know if you had listened early on about the statistic from the DOJ, but supposedly it's over 100 million, or 1/3 of Americans will have a state criminal record on file, and that could impact their ability to get a job, their ability to travel, their ability to rent an apartment. So there needs to be some kind of legislation or some movement to have a mass expungement of the records of people who had criminal charges that were subsequently dropped, so it doesn't impact their lives 40, 50 years down the road as it has yours.
Definitely.
Well, Alvin, we're going to have to save this conversation till after our next break. You're listening to Westchester Eye on the Radio here on WVOX 1460 AM and heard worldwide at WVOX.com. I'm John Charan along with Peter Moses, Ardina Seward, and our special guest is musician Alvin Queen, who's fighting to get back in the country. And also in studio, Gil Chimes, a longtime associate of his, who can give us some perspective on Alvin. Hopefully we'll hear more from him after we come back from this break, so stay tuned.
Let's return now to Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and our Dina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
You're listening to the drum solo of Alvin Queen, a legend in the business. And we're talking to Alvin, who right now is having a significant trouble coming into the United States after giving up his American, or I shouldn't say giving it up, but surrendering his ability to come in the United States with taking on dual citizenship. And he's been living overseas for a while, and he's trying to come back. And it presents a problem that I think a lot of people don't recognize exists. And Alvin, what are you doing now in terms of your most recent steps to try to get back in the country?
Well, I haven't done anything. I'm getting ready to do a video. That will go out. The video is being done Wednesday. Just based on politics, based on incorrectness in the whole thing. For me, I don't want this to happen to any your other young kid. You understand? Mm-hmm. Who being lied to in a courtroom, being told that he is handled as a youthful offender and something he's slapped in the face 30 or 40 years later. See? That's what I'm trying to stop. I live. I have retired here. I got 2 pensions. I can live the rest of my life. I'm in paradise. I don't have a problem. You see, but the thing about it is just that I look at the generations what's to come and the kids what they have to face. If this is justice, then I don't know what the hell peace is.
Well, let's talk to one of your oldest friends, and he's older than you, so he is one of your oldest friends, right, Gil?
That's right.
So, Gil, let's get your perspective on the kind of man he is and was, and why you think this is so unfair.
Hey, Queen, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Gilly.
Mm-hmm. What did I say? See, Gilly calls me the only person that calls me Gilly. Well, we grew up around the block from each other in Mount Vernon. This kid, just from the time he was 8 or 9 years old, you know, you speak about prodigies, okay? Prodigies come in all shapes and figures and forms, and this kid was definitely a prodigy. His home life was not that good, without going into heavy detail, but he was able to rise above all the misfortunes of his home life and stuff like that, and made a way for himself, which is, to me, so incredible. Besides his talent, he was a man when he was a kid, all right? He had a certain direction. He's worked, and I was telling Alina that if she was to list, Alvin, and you could tell her, every major jazz performer or musician in the world, we'd be on the air for 2 hours just mentioning the people he's worked with. His career, he has been able to fortify his career for so many years. And usually if you move out of the country and go perform, of course, over in Europe, they love jazz more than they do. They love our art form more than we do. But yet, he has been able to persevere and became a star over there in Europe, you see. He's brilliant. You just heard a little bit about how he plays. And he grew up studying with Andy Lalino, who had a drum studio on 4th Avenue in Mount Vernon. And then just from there, he just took off, and he's been admired and loved by many, many people. And we've been friends for, God, I'm too old to say.
I will say this about him. I mean, he truly has had a storied career. I mean, there are some other great drummers in the history of jazz drumming, and he replaced an absolute. He replaced Billy Cobham in the band,
right?
And Billy Cobham is for many people one of the 2 or 3 most preeminent drummers in the history of the jazz genre. And he's also played with Michael Brecker, of the Brecker Brothers. He played with George Coleman. He was with Horace Silver.
Right. Oscar Peterson.
George Benson.
You name it.
George Benson.
Last time he was here, he and another drummer friend of mine, Bob Merigliano, the 3 of us went out for dinner. And it takes a lot for me to keep my mouth shut, but just to listen to the artists that these 2 guys have worked with is just astounding and well deserved. Most importantly, Alvin is just absolutely phenomenal, and more important, he's a wonderful person.
Well,
this is horrible. It's just horrible what's
That's
happening.
right. As stated earlier, you're talking about this. This is a man who went from an 8-year-old boy who shined shoes to pay for his drum lessons to the jazz great that he is today, and he can't come into the country.
You can almost make the argument that how politics has changed and how the world has changed, including in the record industry, because back in the day, when he was playing with George Benson or some of these other legends of the genre, the label that they were on would have fought and won him being able to come back into the country because the labels had power. Now the jazz business has degenerated into a shell of its former self. Right. Labels of jazz labels anyway don't have power. There are few and far between as it is. Well, my best friend is a jazz guitarist, and he's making a living, but it's hard.
Well, you know that Tony Bennett years ago, RCA called him into the office and said that they're going to finish his contract because he's not selling enough records. And Tony told the guy, he says, "I'm not here to sell records, I make records." It's a classic statement, but that was the truth. Yeah, it's true. Are you still there, Alvin, by the way?
There's no respect for that. I had a record company, Nilva Records. I produced 20 LPs. I spent $250,000. And that just went down the drain. I'm sitting on master tapes. That's what happened with that.
Let me interrupt for a second. We have a call, I believe, on the line, a caller on the line.
I'll take it.
Okay. Caller, are you there?
Yes, hi. How you doing?
All right.
Just a quick comment or two and a question, if I could.
Sure.
I had to step away from the radio for just a minute, and I know you were talking about this incredible situation, that stuff from 50 years ago stopped you from coming back into the country.
Yep.
But the gentleman gave up his U.S. citizenship. I guess he didn't have a very good lawyer explaining to him the ramifications of what that could mean. But, maybe he could talk about that. But the other thing, a quick comment.
It's a good question.
I like listening to your show, but I hope you're not that bunch of folks that arrogantly insult the president by calling him Orange Hair 45.
No, that's me, and I spent most of my news career working for Fox. I was a New York Post reporter, then I was a producer at Channel 9 News, and I proudly wear on my sleeve my disdain for a man who I don't think respects many Americans. He might respect you, sir, but there are many Americans that he doesn't respect. For that reason, I feel compelled to say horrible things about someone who I think is just not a caring leader of the country. So I appreciate your phone call. Go ahead.
And remember, Vince, that the president had no qualms in calling women fat and ugly. So it's one thing if we granted that maybe orange hair isn't the way to describe him, but also you have to take in mind that when the president of the United States disparages people with disabilities and women who don't come up to his beauty standards, then, basically, as my mother would say, the pot can't call the kettle black.
Well, by the same token, I just don't think that it's fair to make sure that as a country that we apologize for things that we don't have no need for apologizing. Predecessors to the president have managed to apologize for basically the atomic bomb, and unfortunately the atomic bomb's usage came about because we were attacked.
With world and national news, here is the latest update from Fox News Radio on 1460 WVOX. VOX, local and vocal, every day, every night.
WVOX. Let's return now to Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
And we are back live on the air.
Oh, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes, Westchester Eye on
That's
the radio.
That's me playing harmonica on that record.
That's
that
Gil
that you
Thomas
just-
playing harmonica, along with our guest today, who is Alvin Queen, calling in from Switzerland.
Be nice. Be nice.
Gil is here.
He's
laughing.
rolling on the floor.
He's rolling on the floor.
Gil, I'm sure you're very proud of playing the harmonica in that song, but there are many of us, John not included in this.
You did wonderful, man. You did wonderful.
But I think that Tony
I had to get
Orlando
his name
song
in.
is one that I would contemplate suicide if I had to listen to that
Well,
once
you
a
can
day
do as
for
you
the
wish,
rest of
but I still get a resit every now and then.
Absolutely. John, you like that song,
You
right?
made my
Absolutely.
day. You made my day with that one.
I had no. I'm just sitting. I almost fell off the chair. How the heck they pulled that thing out?
So we have another caller. Caller, is the caller still there? Okay, so we don't have another caller.
But if someone
caller.
wants to call in, the studio number is 914-636-0110. That's 914-636-0110. And Alvin, I have a question about what was the procedure of getting into Canada? What kind of paperwork did you have to show them? Or did you have to show them any paperwork at all?
Nothing.
Not a letter. I just show them. I have a letter, and the letter states that I do one concert, a workshop at the college there, and then I have a one-night club performance there. And when I take that to the immigration, they just stamp it, and I go in and play the gig. That's all.
So there was never any reference to your background. There weren't any red flags or anything that.
No, I can go to Japan. Japan is the worst country in the world. I go to Japan, and with a Swiss passport, where they gonna get my background from? That's America's problem. That's Americans. See what happened? There's a lot of people who have musicians who had problems. Mm-hmm. So what's going to happen? The European people they want to do their own investigation now. They're setting up a system where they send it to the FBI's America. America has to give them that information. So if he got busted with marijuana 30 years ago, he can't come to Europe. You know, all of this is going to happen. It has to happen. It can't stay like this. You see? So it doesn't. You know, for me. It really doesn't matter. My whole thing is to visit friends or whatever. America can't afford me. There's no way they can pay $2,000 a hotel, $2,000 salary, and then an airfare for $1,000. They're not going to pay me that kind of money. So I don't expect that. I'm here with Billy Cobham. Billy Cobham lives 1 hour and a half from me. You see?
Tina Turner is
Tina Turner, she's up in the Zurich part, you know, and then Roger Moore, he just died. He was living here. Barbara Hendricks is here, you know. I mean, it's Charlie Chaplin's area, the whole thing. I mean, but we don't go through all of this, you know. So the problem, and then you had a problem. You got 8 million to 11 million Americans living abroad. And they don't mention that these people have lost their mortgages, their health care. They lost all of that because the banks don't want to deal with them. The banks refuse to deal with them after that American thing where all the bank accounts have to be open. It's not only racketeers. People work every day. If you got $50 in a bank account, you have to declare that. There's no secrecy, so the bank rather throw Americans out than to take them in. I had expatriates said, Mr. Queen, you have power. We're glad somebody speaks up for us. That's 8 million, 11 million under the Obama administration and Hillary administration where this big factor thing came up. So these people are not just, they're everyday living citizens over here, and they're suffering because the bank won't give them a bank account.
So you're saying that basically people who've left America to expatriate to Switzerland are now going back to America because they can't afford to stay there.
They can't afford to stay here, and the banks refuse their mortgages. health care and their benefits. They don't get that. So there's a lot of people they're very upset, but nobody listens to them. Only thing what America says, yeah, it was laundering money, it's racketeers, it's drugs. That's all America says. They're not educated about the people who are left in the street. They're not educated about that. Everybody's not a criminal. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
I think those are really good points. Ardina, I know you wanted to talk about something else before the show is over. Do you want to ask any more questions?
I just want to get to next week's show, which is important. I also want to promote a march, a rally, a big rally. It's going to happen on October 28th, which I believe is being sponsored by the 350.org organization. It is the fifth anniversary of Storm Sandy.
That's Saturday night.
That's Saturday night, and there's going to be a march which is going to be in in Brooklyn, and they're going to march for to protest the lack of awareness of climate change and the lack of support by the administration, also the EPA, and one of the groups who helped to organize this will be on the air with us next week. So anybody who wants more information should go to www.350.org, and you'll get a lot of information about the march, big march. We're not talking about a handful of people. We're talking about a coalition of 15 to 20 groups that are going to be out there shouting out in regards to climate control and what has not happened since Storm Sandy. There are people who are still suffering who have not been made whole as a result of paperwork and losing their homes. So, Alvin, I'm going to let you continue. I'm going to let you have the last word. Where do we go from here? Well, from here, you have a gig in Canada on the 4th in Montreal, and everybody should go up there. Well, it's only an hour's flight from New York. It's called the Upstairs Club in Montreal.
Or a 5-hour drive.
Or a 5-hour drive. Alvin,
but you need a passport to get into Canada.
You do now, yes.
Yes, you do.
So, Alvin, I'll let you tell us about that before we sign off.
Well, I'm going on up there to Canada. I told about, see, this was supposed to have been a piece of the American thing. I had 2 days. I had the thing in Washington, D.C., November the 15th. Then I had 2 days in North Carolina at a friend of mine's smoked rib house down there. And I also had 1 day in Harlem for the Wilbur Ware Foundation there. I had to cancel that. And then I had these 2 days in Canada, and I thought it wouldn't be right for me to counsel the people in Canada and make them suffer this. So that's why I'm taking the plane and I'm going on up there for 5 days, and I play for 2 days. Then I come back here, then I go on to Denmark, Copenhagen, and probably after that I'll go into Japan, probably in January, February.
Everywhere but here.
So in other words, we won't be able to be going to Julio's and Yonkers for dinner. Is that what you're saying, Alvin?
No, Gilly, I think I've given up on America. I'm not.
Don't give up, my
there.
friend. Don't give up.
I'm finished with that.
No.
Until they sponge those records and get those records out of there, I'm not even going to make an attempt because it's very dirty.
We got to keep working on it, though, and I'm going to try and do whatever I can on your behalf.
And if people want to contact you, Alvin, how can they do that?
Well, I have the website there.
Okay.
World Wide Web, alvinqueen.com. That's the website. They get me through that or whatever, but I'm going the other way. I put my brain on other countries, other children, and do it that way, you see.
Well, don't give up yet. As you know what Yogi said, it ain't over till it's over, brother, so just hang in there.
Man, well, I sit on television and watch it. I get me some Frito corn chips and sit there and watch it.
Do they export that to Switzerland?
Huh?
Do they export that stuff to Switzerland?
Oh man, we got everything. Everything you got, we got.
Well, that's good to know, or sad to know, because some of the things we have here, I would argue, are not as good as they should be. Thank you very much for both of you guys being on the show.
Great.
You're a real character there.
Thank you.
And Alvin, you sound like a man who's got his life very well organized, and you have had a brilliant career.
Still does.
And we wish you can I finish?
Yeah. Show.
We expected you to continue to having your brilliant career. This guy.
Now you know how we feel when you talk.
Jeez. Anyway, we'll be back next week with another scintillating edition of Westchester Eye on the Radio on WVOX and WVOX.com. My final word is goodbye, John.
From the world headquarters of Whitney Global Media, this is 1460.